Hello, and welcome to Symphony of the Scare, How to Tune Your Haunt. I'm Phil Rayburn. I'm owner and creative principal at Rayburn Creative. Now, I've been designing haunts and haunt-themed experiences in the theme park industry for over 16 years. And today I'm going to share with you some techniques and tricks to elevate your haunt to terrifying new heights. So let me begin with four words: tension, focus, distraction, and fear. Now, these are key elements that every haunt should have for their experience. Your guests should be taken on a journey through a labyrinth of location-specific concepts that, when properly designed, provide a harmonious flow to your haunt, rather than a disconnected jumble of scares. So through proper narrative, precise timing, we can create the pitch-perfect symphony of scare with an unforgettable earworm that your guests will take with them. So today we're going to be focusing on timing and cadence, layout harmony, and design dynamics, and how to use sensory design through auditory cues and distractions, guiding your guests' focus, heightening their fear, all in a way that will better implement your distractions, creating unforgettable tension that will frighten even the most staunchest of nonbelievers. So let's get started. So here's a question for you. When did you last tune your haunt? So what do I mean by this? Okay, well, like any instrument, in order to play any type of music, it must be tuned, right? And your haunt experience is no different. So it must be tuned. So how you set up your layout, your scares, your auditory gags, your prop gags, they all play a musical tune that the audience experiences every time that they go through your haunt. And consciously or subconsciously, we as owners can get immune to this and not realize when something designed is kind of out of whack or out of tune. But it's important that we constantly listen to what our haunt is playing to make sure it is exactly what our audience needs to hear. Now remember, everything contributes to your emotional soundscape. It's critical. This music reinforces the theme of your haunt, be it discordant and cacophonous or melodious and haunting. Your haunt's music is affecting your guests, so make sure that it's tuned. Now, as I go through today, I'm going to be using a lot of musical terms, and I'm using these as metaphors to really understand how we create those immersive experiences. So thinking about tuning your haunt, how do you do that? Well, you start with the timing and the cadence of the piece of music that you're trying to play. You see, the timing of what we see and hear entering the haunt, walking through the haunt, exiting the haunt, should reinforce your narrative, the story you're trying to sell. For example, let's say you have a Victorian parlor as a setting, yet you have modern rock music playing in the room. Is this choice reinforced in your story? Are you doing this to create a paradox within the room and juxtapose two different time eras? Whatever the reason, does the audience know this? That's the key. The tune should always enhance your story, not take away from it. It's like any good piece of music, it's got to have a beat. So what are yours? I mean, really think about it. What are the beats in your haunt? Do you know? How far apart are your scares? Those are beats. Uh, in other words, we can have a scare that goes bump, bump, bump as guests walk through, or is it more bump, bump? Think about that. How do you set up your scares, and what is the music that is playing by having those throughout your haunt? Does every actor have the same sound gag? That's problematic. If you have foot triggers and you're triggering audio gags with your scares, is each one different? Are the timings different? Or are the timings the same? Those are key elements. Again, you're creating a musical masterpiece with your haunts. So what exactly is that? Let's talk about chainsaws. Do you have chainsaw sounds in the chainsaw area as well as live chainsaws? Let me elaborate on this. Let's say that you've got a long hallway, right? And this is your chainsaw hallway. From a story perspective, you set it up that we know that there's going to be chainsaws in there, let's say. So you decide to play chainsaw sounds in there. Well, obviously, when the audience comes in, they're going to hear the chainsaw sounds. Are they going to get desensitized to that sound when the actual scare hits? Or is there another way that you're going to do that to actually enhance the actual chainsaw sound? That all makes a difference. Are we desensitized to that so that the scare is less effective? Or is it a completely silent room that when the chainsaw revs, it becomes this boom and this beat in and of itself? So I've seen some haunts that do that. So I just wanted to put that out there. Think about that. So what are your beats? How is yours set up? You know, use of audio and sound gags is very, very important in drawing your haunt guests into your experience. You know, Disney is masterful at this when they pull you down an alley as you're walking through. Let's say you're going to walk World of Showcase and you hear this little violin playing in France, but it's way at the back in an alley. But it draws you in to that area. So use that as part of your source audio. You could have a room that is completely silent, and just barely we have the crying of a little baby that's coming from a doll in the corner. Well, that's great because as an audience member, I'm going to turn and I'm going to look at that little doll, and that sets me up for either the gag to come out behind the doll or come over here behind my head. It's all being used to set up the music that I'm listening to and play that into your haunt itself. Okay. Mentioning source audio. Do you use source audio sounds, or is it just BGM, background music, around the whole haunt? Is each room specific? Again, all of those things are important. Is your music so loud that you can't hear the screams of your guests? All of that plays a hand in how your haunt sounds and what type of music you want your haunt to play. Now, listen, I'm going to caveat this. There's no right or wrong answer, right? I mean, you may have your music cranking and that's how you want it. You want this, chaos to happen in there, or it's a rave and it's set up and it's just loud and that's part of it because you're trying to drown out the ears. That's fine. That's a choice. What I'm trying to tell you is just to make sure that the choice you're making reinforces the story that you're trying to tell in your haunt. Because if you have a story that's supposed to be one way and your auditory and sight and all of those other things are different than that, unless there's a reason for that, it's going to create a problem with your audience's true immersion into your haunt. So let's think a little bit about techniques, right? How can you use these auditory gags, and how can you use sound in your in your haunt? Well, one of the things you want to do with this, you want to build anticipation. This is the most useful of scare techniques. It's an old theater trick, showing the pistol in the first act and firing it in the third. You want to use those beats that we've talked about. How is that set up from the actors to the sound to the sight gags? What are the beats of your haunt as you're walking through? Use that tune to build anticipation towards the climax of your hero or icon scare at the end of the maze. If you build this payoff, guests will feel that they've been on a journey. And this increases their fear factor because they're making it worse in their imaginations. And that's fun. And it's key, because if you can get them to buy in, for instance, I'm sure that all of us has had a time where we hear a piece of music and immediately a memory comes to mind, right? It's sense memory, right? I know I've heard that piece before and I'm remembering a time. Uh, that used to happen all the time with certain 70s songs for me, because you would hear them and you would think back immediately to 4th of July or something along the summer or something along those lines. So there's music out there that will trigger a response. So use that to your advantage. Use the musical beats of your haunt to trigger an automatic response in your guests that they may not even realize is being triggered. Another thing you can do along with anticipation, there is expectation. And these are a little different. It does go hand in hand with anticipation, but if guests feel or they expect something to happen, That's what you're trying to build there. So you want to build it going towards that. And what's great about building expectation is that you can use that to your advantage. You can either deliver on that expectation and give them the payout that they're expecting, or you can misdirect it and you take that expectation and totally flip it on its head and give them something complete opposite. Either of those things are great to do. By doing both of those, of course, you're also building tension. This is what gives you the screams. And tension should be built prior to, during, and after the event for a true immersion. So not only just about what they see in the house, but you can start setting that stage outside. You can set it when they exit. You can set it in your marketing materials. It's all about creating that story and using that to tune your haunt. One of the things I want to caution you against is remember to allow for breaths of security. And what do I mean by this? I mean that you need to allow your guests to have a moment of safety before you hit them again, because it allows them to calm just a second, which drives the effect of being scared even more so when they reach another scare. So use these to great effect in your haunt, either by leading towards another scare or a distraction, but think of them as the musical bridge, right? It takes you from the rousing chorus into the key change, into crescendo, the tune. Okay, allowing them the moments to breathe, it just makes the startles that much more effective. And all of this is used to play with the mind, right? We're in the business of scaring people. So what we want to do is really get them fearful. Granted, they know it's going to be a safe environment that they're playing in, but we want them to have that rush, that euphoria, that they are just totally terrified. And playing with their mind by using these things, it's your most powerful tool to scare someone in their own imagination. It's use it to your advantage. Subtle things like sound behind them, or a flash of light, and rhythmic pulses. Again, the beats, right? Low moans, anything that will distract your guests and set them up for a bigger scare. All of this is important. All right, let's switch gears a little bit, and I'm going to bring up for you an actual design. I have a concept design, and I want to talk a little bit about layout harmony with design and placement of actors. So this is a schematic for a house that I did called Unhinged. And Unhinged is a concept that I was working on that focuses on the room of 13 doors. And the idea behind that is that there is a keymaster in here that is collecting specimens for his experience. And this house is the journey through those doors to discover what he has collected and what he's doing with it. So to begin with, what I did here is that I started thinking about the tune that I wanted to use. It's really making sure that this moment here that we talked about, is kind of the opening number, right? So the opening sounds that we want the audience to hear. So this right here is going to be a pulse point. And what I mean by a pulse point is we're going to load in the number of people we want to go through this main area for the show. We're creating that. Some will call it a pre-show. We can call it the beginning of the show, but it's a stage scene area. You think Haunted Mansion, right? Everybody's in the crowded room and the story starts. Obviously, we don't want it that crowded. Basically, come in here, you have an actor that's on this pedestal and starts talking about what they're going to do. And then they set the room for the 13 doors, which are all here. So and then once we relieve, we go there. So to help you kind of understand that a little better, look, I've put, this is the path of the maze. So everything you see there is going to, the blue areas are all actor areas and or scenic that actors can be in. So if we look at the point, we know that we're going to start here. Think of that as kind of the thing. I follow that up with chorus points. So as you see, if you think of a music, each piece has a chorus to it, right? So we have that. Think of Bon Jovi's "You Could Love That Name," right? Shot Through the Heart starts the song, right? So that's kind of what this particular thing is at the beginning. And then we go into the repeat or the refrains of those throughout. So I've got those throughout. Um, and then if you'll notice, I did not mark this one, even though that is another round door. And the whole idea behind that is that they're going to enter the same room multiple times. So it's done to kind of play with them a little bit. So what I've done there is that particular room up here is what my key change would be. I'm ramping up to the crescendo, right? So it's the last thing that we see before we actually get to the crescendo, the final room here. So that's how I've kind of spaced out my music, spaced out what it is that we are creating here. Our beats, our scare beats are, these are the big beats. So I've got those laid out. And so now what I can do is start looking at, okay, so now that I've got those kind of laid out and I know how this musical journey is going to take me through, what is the next step that I need to do? So I need to start figuring out where my actors are going to go and what my scares look like between each of these chorus points. Okay, so let's look. I've already placed a couple here that you can see kind of in these first three rooms. So obviously we'll have an actor here as well, which let me put that in there. We have an actor there as well that's going to kind of lead everything off, and probably one out here too. Those are not showing up well. So we'll do another one there. There we go. So that gives us an idea there. And obviously actor amount of people that you have in operations are always going to play a role. So you want to have that kind of information figured out first, because you're operational. If you're only operating with 20 actors, then that's going to determine where your beats are in the show. Well, we're going to say blue sky here, and I have as many as I want. So that's it's going to play. So basically, after coming out of this, we're going to pulse out. I've got an actor here that can play both this particular room. He can play this room in here if he wants. He can play right here in the corner. Or he can actually play later if we want, because this room is a see-through into room. So we can actually place him there too. So it gives us multiple opportunities with that one actor. This particular actor here plays this path. So he is definitely going along this path here. And then we have this actor who can not only play this path, but he plays here. He can play here. So if I go through this and I get maximum numbers of scare, I'm getting hit once, bam. I'm getting hit maybe twice, boom. And then a third time here if we're lucky. Or I'm getting hit down here for a third time. So the beat after coming out of that is very boom, boom, boom. Or it can be boom, boom, ba-bop, right? So I'm just trying to figure out what is the best solution to hit the number of guests that we've got going through here. And that's going to depend on how much we pulse in here. Because if we want to pulse more, we can always do that. But obviously going through there, that's going to determine that. The good thing, and I always look at that, is design to see the maximum number of times that a person can be used, especially if it's the same person. Because it's going to make it seem like it's fuller, even though it's this person doing his path. He goes once, scares, he goes back here, scares, he goes here, scares, he goes back here, scares, he goes here, scares. It's the same pattern that he's doing, but people are getting double scares from one person. So that's what we want to keep in mind there. Same with this guy. I mean, you could actually add a scare door right here if you wanted to, and boom, 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 boom. He just goes back and forth. So that's our rhythm coming out of there. So either I've got a steady beat, 1, 2, 3, coming out of that room, or I've got a triple beat, or a double beat, I should say, with a 1, 1, 1, 2, or a 1, 2, 1. There's a bunch of different rhythms that you can come in and play with there. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm saying really understand the beats of your scares in there, because you are creating that music. So then we go down in here, and I'm going to have an actor here that can play this particular area here, whether it be drop doors or whatnot, but he also can play this particular area in this room. They come through here again, so they get that first bit of scares, bam, 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 and then they're back in the chorus. So they're back in the same room that they just left. So the idea is to really make them think, are we back in here? and to really disorient them, right? Even though it's the same song, they're still seeing the same things of the 13 doors that they saw in here, but it's another room, so it's really playing upon that. And then they enter into another section. I've got an actor here, I've got an actor here that can pop, and of course this guy right here can pop there. Whether or not you want to use this guy for this area as well, we can do that. We could also add a person in here if we have enough bodies, or we can add another one down here if we wanted to as well. So that would really make a really high impact room if we were going to do that, because my scares would be bang, 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 bang. So that's a steadier beat, but it's building tension, right? So just think about how you want those scares to lay out. And then, of course, going through here, these guys can pop in through there if they wanted to, and we go through here. So is this more of a breath right here after being through those beats? Do we want a breath in here and there's only one guy? Obviously, we'd put a guy on top of that platform right there, and then these guys would be able to pop out here. So the question becomes is, do you want this as a breath or not, or do you want to ramp it up going into another chorus? Personally, I would probably keep it a ramp and keep the same beat that I had in here, here. So if I'm going to go with a beat of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then I can hit here 1 or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We would get the 4, 5 right up in here. Boom. 4, and then 5 would come out of here. So again, you still got the same beats, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or you can just go like we did up here with 3. So it could go 3, 5, 3, or it could be 3, 5, 5, depending on however you want to do it. Does that make sense? And that's what you're doing. And then again, you're back in here. So this hallway is rather short. So what I would do is do a breath here, okay? And just leave it more scenic, or maybe an interesting sight gag that allows the guest or interactive moments or push throughs or things that they have to go through. And then it goes into kind of an augmented chorus room here. Again, they're seeing just that point and then coming into this particular scare area here. Again, all of this is done to try to build towards the crescendo of the piece, right? So you always want to build that, and you want to look at your rhythm and how can you do that in such a way that really gets you to this point, so that it's a great build leading up to this. Because if you'll notice, there's a long path after we come out of this. So we go into this particular room, it's the last time, and then we come through all of this, out and down, all the way through here until this final room. And the final room is set up a little bit differently. So the doors may be opened. There may be kind of a dishevelment there, just depending on what we want to do with the particular story that we're trying to tell. But that gives you some ideas of what I normally try to do when we're setting up scare positions. Is you want to have the maximum effort and the maximum amount of scares, and sometimes you're working with a minimal audience. So it's really important that you kind of plan out those scares and say, okay, what is that rhythm that I'm trying to do in here? What am I trying to create? And again, these may all have the same person sitting in the center. So you may want to play on that motif of this guy here taking you through the first act and explaining the story to you, and then have repetition of them sitting there, and then all of a sudden this room has changed. What's happened to it? It's definitely the precursor to the end. So think about those particular things. All in all, it's really good to have an opportunity to play with these big beats, right? So it's important to understand what these big beats are and what you want to do with them. Not every house is going to look like this, but you should always be building for that. And I love to play with the idea that you're inside one room, but you're actually going through it multiple times. And I think if there's a way to do that, I've always wanted to play with that in actuality. Again, this is a concept idea, but I think it would be really cool to actually revisit and have the audience believe they're always coming back to the same room, which is this here. So again, it's just a mind trap. But again, we're building towards that crescendo. We're tuning our haunt so that between each section, we want to make sure that we got our beats in here, that we have our breath right here, that we're building up towards this, and then it builds to the crescendo and out. Now, we only went into really actor specific areas. I didn't get into sight gags and where we're putting props and things like that, and the details of which actor has an audio trigger, which actor is live. But that would be my next step, which would take a little longer than the time we have today. But again, doing all of that allows me to really understand what my haunt sounds like before we even get it built, so that I'm keeping in mind the music that I want to play, right? Keep in mind that your beats would also include all of that stuff. Again, let me reiterate: audio point source, prop and scenic gags, any animatronic and sensory specific items. So that is all included in addition to the action. And I know we're talking about it as a music and auditory terms, but it's not just the music. So I just want to make that clear. So once all of those are placed and you're comfortable with the sounds that they make, then it's time to really refine. And then you turn the volume up to 11. So let's talk a little bit about design dynamics. Designing the dynamics of your haunt tune to evoke maximum fear is your most difficult task. It's adjusting the gain, using musical terms. It's adjusting the gain. It's making sure that everything is mixed perfectly to create the ultimate sound that you want. You have to coordinate your positions, your effects, your distractions, your misdirection, your sound, your lights, actors, all of it. It's complicated. But that being said, it is critical that you design these scares. Taking the time to refine and retune your haunt beforehand is like the difference between a high school garage band and Metallica. It may all sound heavy, but one won't get a gig and the other has multi-platinum records. So go for the platinum, right? So let's start with sensory distractions. Obviously, everyone is aware of startles, right? Pop outs, drop doors is exactly what it says. This type of scare startles the guests. But set these up carefully because the more nuanced and subtle, the better. Now, guests can spot a drop door set up a mile away, so use this knowledge to your advantage. And don't forget, a drop door is a beat unto itself, so keep that in mind as well. It's going to be a double beat: drop, bang, scare, right? So that's two. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about the music of your haunt. Distractions. Again, this is controlling the environment. You only let them see what you want them to see. Now, this type of scare allows you to draw focus to where and to when you want your scare to happen. It's a setup. Your lighting effects, your sound, etc. All of them. Great distractions, but plan where you want the audience to look. Another little trick of the trade is misdirection. Magicians use this all the time. It's an entertainment trope, but you can really use misdirection to drive the intensity of your scares. You can use startle scares in this capacity too. You're showing them something in one hand, and you're setting up for the bigger scare in the other hand, right? So as I mentioned, we've talked a lot about sound, but don't forget the sights as well. Part of tuning for us is making sure the visuals match up with the score of the house. Think of it like filming with the audience as live participants in the film. Think of it as your camera. You are essentially creating a live action film. What do you want your guests to see in the film and when? To what extent? You know, that extent, don't just turn your actors loose to do whatever they like. They are your musicians. It's important that they're all playing the same piece. It's not an orchestra over here and a jug band over here. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen an actor going rogue and doing something so out of place that it took me completely out of the haunt experience. Again, make sure that they are not all scaring the same way either. Now, with the caveat, if it's an essential part of your story or as part of a misdirection setup and you're building expectation and you're going to deliver something different, great. Again, all of these things that I'm saying here have exceptions to them. It all needs to reinforce the story that you're trying to tell, though. Repetitive scares, they have the tendency to become mundane and will not create fear. Rather, it's going to desensitize your guests and become ho-hum. So each actor, note, it's a note, right? So each actor is a note in your composition and use them effectively. You are scoring your particular event and your experience. It's your choice how you use those notes, but make sure that they're all harmonious, unless there's a reason not to. Another design dynamic that you must ensure is tuned is your fear factor. You've got to control the fear. What do I mean by this? It means that basically you want to control how scared your audience should be at certain times, and you want to either ratchet that up or pull that back, again, to play the music of your haunt, to make sure that that tune is there. So control that. Use the room and the beats of the room to your advantage. I would suggest beta testing if you can, with different scenarios, different music, different beats within each room. Don't settle for just one. Even though we've gone and we've looked at the layout and the harmonious, allow yourself time to experiment too. Go ahead and just jam, so to speak, and see what happens, because sometimes you may get a really cool lick out of that, and sometimes it may not work, but at least you have the opportunity to play with that a little bit too. So beta testing is really important that you do that. And it's a valuable tool to create this immersive scare for your guests, because you're getting to experience it and see how people react to it. Everybody is going to react to it differently, and that's okay. But what you want to do is make sure that you've explored all the options, that you're giving the best piece of music that that room can deliver. Okay? Remember, the tune your haunt plays, it does affect your guests. They may not get it. The metaphor may go completely over their heads, but they're going to remember that. It's sensory. And sensory, as we said, music can trigger things. So you may be playing a piece of music that when that guest hears it the next time, they're going to get the same fear that was evoked when they heard it the last time. So don't lose your tune, all right? Keep your instrument in key and use these to make a great haunt. I hope you got something useful out of today. Again, music is the metaphor, but it's really about making sure that your haunt is synchronized. Everything is in tune, that you've really thought about how that music is playing, and you're creating the best haunt that you can create. I'm going to have my contact information up here at the end. So if anybody has any questions or they just want to reach out and chat some more, please feel free to contact me. Until then, stay safe. Everybody, please have a great haunt season this year. We're all crossing our fingers that we're going to be back to normal pretty soon. So I hope you enjoyed today. Thanks for coming. Thanks for listening. And we'll talk soon.